The Kremlin has accused the West of trying to sabotage its showcase Russia-Africa summit later this week. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says that African states had been subjected to, quote, unprecedented pressure not to take part. President Vladimir Putin is expected to attend the St Petersburg summit on Thursday and Friday as part of a concerted push for influence in the region, a move also echoed by the West. Well, CNA's Isabel Nakuria reports.
Many African countries have remained neutral, even as the West isolated Russia over the war in Ukraine. But the shadow of the war looms large over the upcoming Russia-Africa summit, for example, in the crucial area of food security. After pulling out of the Black Sea grain deal, Russia now wants to export more of its fertilizer and grain directly to Africa. It says some goods would be sold for profit, while others would be donated to poorer countries. With the West piling on sanctions against Moscow, the Kremlin is hoping to turn to Africa for new business deals.
The most important thing today is not just to arrange this grain deal, but to find some mechanisms which will allow Russian Federation to deal with African countries directly. This can also change the amount of the grain which will be engaged in these deals, and it can also influence the prices for the grain.
When Russia pulled out of the grain deal, it accused the US and the European Union of profiting from it, while less than 3% of exports went to poor nations in Africa. But the UN says 57% of food exported by Ukraine was sent to developing countries. Russia says it's able to meet the needs of Africa even without exports from Ukraine. In 2022, it exported 11 million tons of grain to the region, while in the first half of 2023, it sent more than 10 million tons. The country now expects to use the meeting with African leaders to show its commitment to sustaining the food supply.
Economically, it's possible through the government purchase the grain from farmers and supply to Africa.
The UN has asked Russia to consider rejoining the grain deal, warning that millions of people in Africa and Asia could go hungry. Global food prices have jumped since Russia pulled out of the deal. UN programs are concerned that countries in the Horn of Africa, including Somalia, Kenya and Ethiopia, are depleting their food supplies and are at risk of hunger.
The World Food Programme warns more than 23 million people in the Horn of Africa are at risk of hunger, and the shockwaves of the Russia-Ukraine conflict could even worsen the situation. The outcome of the summit could help prevent that.
Aside from food security, African heads of state have also been seeking a peaceful solution to the conflict in Ukraine, something that could be discussed at the two-day summit. And with some African nations heavily reliant on Russia for grain and military equipment, observers say Moscow will be keen to highlight existing cooperation between both sides. The US is Africa's biggest funder in the health sector, while Russia offers less in humanitarian aid. But President Putin has dismissed Western aid as having conditions attached to it.
I think Russian Federation able to give this necessary amount of grain for free, yes, like donation to African countries. But the main problem is about logistics. You know, a lot of restrictions around Russia, and very important and dangerous thing that any ship, car, train, or I don't know, plane, and if it achieves Russia, it can be under sanctions.
Russia also says more of its companies are ready to work in Africa and improve on technology, nuclear energy and agriculture. And it plans to open up more embassies and trade missions, further expanding its influence in the region that is growing in strategic importance. Isabel Nakiria, CNA, Moscow.